This special presentation was produced in high definition by WEDU, Tampa, St. Petersburg, Sarasota.
Coming up next, the legislature draws new maps for some congressional districts, but fair district groups say they don't go far enough. Charlie Crist, who wants to be governor, is profiled in a major newspaper article. A lawsuit in Tallahassee might succeed in revealing what some think is a secret email system used by the governor and his aides. And Republicans are divided over the issue of Greenlight Pinellas. Political Insights next on Florida This Week.
From the WEDU studios, this is Florida This Week. And now, moderator Rob Lorai.
Welcome back. This week our panelists are Adam Smith is the political editor at the Tampa Bay Times. William March covers politics for the Tampa Tribune. Jennifer Lux is a political consultant and a Republican, and Barry Edwards is a political strategist and a Democrat. So thank you for coming. It's great to have you here. Well, Governor Rick Scott has given his okay to a new map that will change several congressional districts in the state, but the map is facing opposition. The Republican-controlled legislature drew the districts in a special session this week after a Tallahassee judge ruled that the state's current congressional districts were illegally drawn to help the GOP. The new map reshapes the boundaries of 7 of the state's 27 congressional districts, including the 5th congressional district, which still meanders from Jacksonville to Orlando.
This was a majority African-American district. It was 50%. Now it's about 48%. So they took some of the black voters out, put them elsewhere to try to change the landscape of it. And the judge could send it back, and it could wind up in the Supreme Court.
But the groups that challenge the existing map say that they will ask the judge to reject the new one approved this week.
We shouldn't have to go through this again 10 years from now, or the future legislature in 10 years from now.
The judge has scheduled a hearing for next week to go over the revised districts. Deirdre McNabb, president of the League of Women Voters of Florida, said that the new map looks suspiciously like the map that had been previously ruled unconstitutional. She also faulted lawmakers because the proposal, ultimately approved, was initially drawn up in closed-door meetings between 2 top GOP legislators, attorneys, and their legislative staff.
The process we went through was there was no gamesmanship or whatever, playing, let's hide the ball. We said, here's the map.
What sense of trust do I have that something has gone completely different than what happened in 2012?
So, Wendy, let's go back to Deirdre McNabb's quote from the League of Women Voters. Does this map look like the old one?
It looks a lot like the old one. I think they made changes to 7 districts in the state. Now, that's out of 27 total districts. I think the numbers are they actually changed the districts for something like 370,000 voters in those 7 districts, and that's not a whole lot of people. The map doesn't look at first blush like it's going to result in any more competitive congressional races than we've had. That could turn out to be wrong. That's a speculative comment.
What's your sense of this judge, Judge Lewis? Do you think he's going to be tough on what comes to him and when the hearings happen next week?
Well, Judge Lewis has already used language in his rulings that expresses a certain amount of anger, a certain amount of indignation about what went on in the redistricting process. He said that the earlier when they produced the first map was a mockery of what the process was supposed to be. But he's also signaled that he's aware of the logistical and other problems connected with really coming down hard and throwing the book at the defendants by scheduling different elections this year, by holding special elections. And this new map, with its comparatively minor amount of change, is going to very much put Judge Lewis on the spot, going to put him on the hot seat to either force a drastic step that he said he isn't eager to do, or go along with what the Republicans
if that's
propose.
the strategy. Do the bare minimum to change these districts.
It's been
They're
the strategy.
still absurdly gerrymandered districts.
It's been the strategy for the
and
Republicans
then
majority
put
in the
him on the
legislature
spot.
for years.
He's going to look like an activist judge, or they're going to paint him as an activist judge if he pushes them again and says these are still wrong.
Well, I guess the question is, does he delay the election? I mean, maybe he could, continue the process, but not delay the election until he gets something that's closer to, in his mind, what fair districts represent.
That would be a big move to delay the election. I think that's going to be tough for anybody to suggest he does.
Very.
Well, I think we ought to step back and see, how do we get into this position? And if both parties would recognize, when you act like statesmen, you always win in the long run. In 1998, the last time we had a Constitutional Revision Commission, we were one vote away from installing a nonpartisan commission to actually draw the districts statewide. And Stanley Marshall from Tallahassee flipped his vote at the last minute, and they lost. And Dexter Douglas wasn't able to achieve that legacy. And because of that, we've got fair districts came in with the League of Women Voters and other groups. But if you look at what their intention was, it's been hijacked. They thought it would pass a smell test, but unfortunately, it has to pass a legal test. And there's things and I worked with Ron Saunders when he was leader for redistricting for the House, for the Democrats. It's called the REACT score and the Convex Hull score. And what those do is they give you a visual and mathematical score on whether your district is compact or not. And in both of these, for the new districts, they improved from 0.29 to 0.42, and actually the perimeter decreased by 124 miles. So it does mathematically look better, and it is smaller, but in reality, it went from 49.9% African American, Corinne Brown's district, District 5, to 48.11, a decrease of 1.79, and the performance for Republicans in the Daniel Webster district declined by 2.5%. So no incumbent's going to be defeated. Nothing really changed. It just looks a little bit better. It still doesn't pass the smell test because we don't have a method in there
and
to
I'm
make
struck,
it work.
and the reaction I get from so many average citizens in Tampa Bay after some of these decisions is, why just those districts? Why is my district so screwy? And that's a very good question.
And it's because of those two scores. When you look at the Kathy Castor district, and this judge upheld them in his decision and said the score that he had for REAC and the Convex Hull score for Castor's district met the legal standard.
Even though her district jumps Tampa Bay.
Right. It meets the legal standard, not the smell standard.
Jim, what's your sense of this judge? I mean, how tough is he going to be in terms of looking at this district and saying, if it only went down 2% or so for Corinne Brown, is he going to say this doesn't really measure up to what I ordered?
It'll be interesting to see. I think the legislature last week and at the beginning of this week did what they could to meet not only his requirements, but also the federal standard and the state standard, which quite frankly don't always meet in the middle. I mean, it would be nice to say that we could have a bunch of purple squares throughout Florida, but you're not going to find that in the Panhandle nor in other areas of the state. And so I think it'll be interesting to see what he does there. But I do think it would be a drastic measure for him to push the election. But shortly before we came in, I believe the supervisor of elections announced that the quickest that they could do this election was sometime in May. And I think we're going to start having serious implications for the citizens of Florida when there may be a gap in their congressional representation, and or those legislators that eventually would be elected being that much further behind that freshman class in Washington, and therefore not getting some of the more senior spots as they move up in the ranks. And so I think you have to weigh those, and so we'll see what he chooses.
All right, and the judge is going to have a hearing this week on what to do next.
But this shows you that elections do matter, because next year the new governor of Florida, the new Senate President, Speaker of the House will all appoint members to the Constitutional Revision Commission, which is done every 20 years. You're going to put things directly on the ballot, and they could put a ballot measure to have an independent bipartisan commission draw the districts and fix this once and for all in Florida.
Yeah, they could. It could also snow in Miami.
Well, last weekend, in a lengthy article, the Tampa Bay Times profiled former Governor Charlie Crist. The article is a wide-ranging exploration of both his personal and his professional life. One anonymous person told the Times that Crist worked only a few hours a day when he was governor. We learned that his father is his closest advisor. He's a tireless campaigner and genuinely seems to enjoy meeting and talking with average Floridians.
You going to vote? Yeah, of course we are. I'd appreciate your vote. No problem.
He's also unflappable while facing the toughest questions and answers most of them directly.
Once the primary is behind us, I think we all need to unite, because all of us know that we want to get Rick Scott out and get somebody back in the governor's mansion that has a heart and really cares about the environment, education, ethics, the economy, growing from the middle class out.
But we also find out that he's a closet smoker
eats very little, and that at least 5 of his former advisors and fundraisers have gone to prison for crimes. Slate said of the piece that it's a tragic comic biography of a charismatic, shallow, completely unprincipled, and very successful politician who comes across less as a human being than he does a Carl Hiaasen Elmore Leonard caricature.
So, Adam, congratulations on the piece to you and Michael Cruz. What do you think the most significant thing that the two of you found out in reporting?
Well, we talked about this earlier. This was not supposed to be some expose. This was supposed to be sort of a nuanced character portrait of the guy. So we didn't go at this really looking for bullet item conclusions. But, you know, I think people that didn't know Charlie, didn't feel like they knew Charlie, will see that certainly he's not the most engaged in terms of governing. He's got attention deficit disorder, jumping from office to office. He's an extraordinarily gifted politician. And he's got some, you know, there may be some issues in there, like his wife being estranged from her children that Republican opponents will use. Mm-hmm. You know, some things about his personal life and trashing hotel rooms and that sort of thing may come up later on in the campaign.
Jen, do you think Republicans will capitalize on this article and say, look, this is what Charlie Crist is all about?
I think, first of all, congratulations on the article. It was very, very well written. I think that Republicans will be happy to see that the person that we've seen here, especially in Central Florida, the person that we've always known existed, is finally being shown a little bit more to the citizens of Florida. And for me, when I started reading the article, it very much evoked almost The Great Gatsby, where, you know, here's Charlie Crist and he's kind of flitting about and speaking with people and glad-handing, and he has this grandiose facade. But in this particular case, the thing that he's obsessing about, his daisy, is whatever next highest political office he's trying to find and trying to run for. I think it says something about the man when, you know, since the state Senate, he's never run for re-election. He continues to run for whatever highest office is next. And I think the citizens of Florida deserve better than that. You know, when you are governor, you have to govern, and it just seems that he prefers to campaign, as opposed to Rick Scott, who has done a great job governing. You may not like him, you may not want to have a beer with the guy, you may think he's socially awkward, but he's accomplished what he set out to accomplish, and in fact has made Florida a better state to raise your family and run a business.
You know, Barry, I sure love it when people quote great literature on the show, don't you?
Absolutely. I'm more concerned about why Rick Scott is wedded to bad decisions and isn't evolved and find the correct decisions until right before the election, where all of a sudden he's worried about the environment, worried about education and funding for that. As Charlie evolved, he evolves like all of us. I don't have the same positions I did 10 or 20 years ago.
So you don't think this article is going to be a net negative for Charlie Crist?
And, you know, when I choose a doctor, I don't choose a doctor for who I want to go have a beer with. I choose a doctor for who's going to make the right decision on my health care. And we know that Charlie Crist, at the end of the day, is going to make the right decision for the people of Florida versus the wrong decision for the big interest for Rick Scott.
Well, sorry, I was going to say the beautiful thing about it, and actually it's great for the paper, is you could always do another profile in, you know, another 2 or 3 months, and the person that Charlie Crist is probably going to change again. So we'll yet to see.
Wendy, what's your take on this? Do you think that this is going to be a negative for Charlie Crist? Because there are some details, I think, that are previously unknown in this piece. Does this give ammunition to the Republican side in the campaign?
Well, I think Adam just acknowledged that most of what, in fact, nearly all of what was in the story had been previously reported, but it hadn't been put together in that kind of package and documented with as many interviews as were done. More of a sum up than a revelation, right? Yes, it is a net negative for Crist because of its portrayal of him. I think that the things that in it that would hurt him worst would be the portrayal of him as disengaged at the office and the questions raised about his family life. But how negative? I mean, there's never been a more disengaged president than Ronald Reagan, who's now considered a hero. Is Crist more disengaged than Reagan? I doubt it. Bill Clinton, on the other hand, was heavily engaged. W. Bush was less engaged. Engagement is not why we elect our executive branch leaders. The reporting in the story about Crist's family, this is extremely difficult reporting to do. It's difficult to get right. And any time that you write a story about who a person is, you're entering a difficult territory for a newspaper reader. Now, I really liked this story, frankly. It added to my understanding of who Charlie Crist is. But I would strongly recommend that if you read it, keep in mind that this is some interviews done with some people, some sources, by 2 reporters. The last really high-quality biography that I read took 5 years to write.
You know, we're months away from the November election. How much time, I mean, are the voters paying attention right now? Or are they going? When do voters start to engage on looking at these 2 candidates, whoever the Democrat is, and Governor Rick Scott? When do you think that people will get serious about deciding? Have they made up their minds already, or what's your take?
I think 80% of the people have decided. First of all, in a polarized electorate like we have now, as soon as the primaries are done on August 26th, 90% of the Republicans are going to become avid Rick Scott fans, 90% of the Democrats are become avid Charlie Crist fans. And the 3 types of independents, the leaners on both sides, are going to go there. So we're talking about a very narrow margin of the independents.
Who will actually make up the decision.
The swing voters. Yeah. Well, and the problem for Governor Crist is more Republicans have turned out historically in his off cycles, in the last 3 off cycles elections for governor. And because of the president, popularity, for good or worse, being down, it's more difficult to get Democrats excited. So he's going to have to carry in independents, which typically are not going to vote in the governor's race. They're going to vote whether they want to reward or punish the president.
Okay. Well, there's a lawsuit in Tallahassee which claims that Governor Rick Scott and his aides are routinely ignoring the state's open records laws. This week, the judge in the case agreed with the plaintiff and said that internet companies Google and Yahoo must disclose who established several private email accounts used by Governor Scott.
The governor's lawyers did not deny the existence of the accounts, but called the exercise a fishing expedition because the email accounts used by senior staff members and the governor are private and not for public business. The plaintiff in the case is a lawyer who is suing Scott and Attorney General Pam Bondi over whether they hid records related to a land dispute. A spokesperson for the governor says the lawsuit was brought by a man who has a personal grudge against state government and no shortage of time to file lawsuits as a trial lawyer representing himself. But the lawyer is having some success, and he has produced evidence that Scott and his staff have used the Google and the Yahoo accounts to conduct government business. The governor has promised to conduct business in the sunshine. A few years ago, he promoted Project Sunburst. That's a state-run website that would post all emails to and from the governor and his top staff to further the goal of transparency.
So, Barry, how serious is this? Do all administrations do this, or is this lawyer up there in Tallahassee onto something?
Rick Scott 3.0. He started off secretive, he became transparent, and now he's secretive again. This is the worst administration for this. Governor Crist, when he was governor, had an Office of Open Accountability that I think the press could easily access. All their emails were available. And what Governor Scott has done is he talks a good game, but they do their business on text messages, private emails, and it's wrong. So either he wants to follow the intent of the law or follow the spirit or the letter of the law. And he always seems to, as his career at HCA, he follows the letter of the law and he skirts the spirit.
Jim, what would you say back to Barry?
I always love the language right now from Charlie Crist campaigns about being for something before you're against it, before you're for it, from a man who's changed parties 2 times in the last 10 years. But with that being said, I think that, we have yet to see. We have yet to see what the emails are there. I think that, if it isn't as transparent as he said he would be, there should be some price to pay for that. With that being said, and being associated with politicians who have been the target of these people that continuously file these public records requests over and over and over, I think there needs to be a point as well where there is some accountability, especially in a situation where there's a lawsuit. There are entire firms that are set up to handle lawsuits coming from public records requests so that they're making money off of that, and I don't think that's the intent of the law either. And so I'd like to see a fix for that as well.
Wendy, what do you think? I mean, is this standard operating procedure for governor's administration to somehow have private emails so they can discuss private business, or do you think that there may be some public business going on in these private email accounts?
Well, the evidence produced in this lawsuit shows public business being discussed in the private email accounts. Rick Scott has looked into a TV camera and denied that happened, but the emails are there. And yes, it has happened before. The first governor to make any kind of extensive use of email at all was Jeb Bush. And one of the first things that happened was that he or members of his office were accused of using private email accounts to avoid public scrutiny. He famously sent out an email to his entire government list pointing out that don't send emails to my official office account, because when you do, you create a public record that any reporter can get a hold of. Mm-hmm. So yes, I think this is significant. There were people in Scott's office who were using private email accounts in order to avoid having their correspondence go on the Sunburst site that Scott set up with great fanfare to show that he was running a transparent government.
Adam, is there anything the governor could do right now or should do right now, do you think, to get this problem behind him? Or is he, should he just kind of wait it out? Is he in the clear?
Don't stand in front of the camera and say night is day. It's proven. It's a given. He was going around the public records law, at least the spirit of the public records law. Unfortunately, that's not that unusual in the last few administrations.
All right. Well, this week, leaders of the county's Republican Party came out unanimously against the Greenlight-Pinellas transportation plan, saying it would unduly burden taxpayers and build expensive and unnecessary transportation options like a 24-mile light rail line from St. Petersburg to Clearwater.
It puts the party at odds with many business leaders and some Republican elected officials who have endorsed the 1% sales tax. Prominent Republican office holders, such as retiring County Commissioner Susan Latvala, tell the Tampa Tribune that it's the party activists who are out of step with the residents on the green light issue, which is projected to spur economic development in cities across the county. Local elected leaders largely have backed the $2.2 billion plan. City councils in 13 of the county's 24 municipalities have endorsed it, with only Seminole voting against. If approved by voters, Pinellas County's sales tax would increase to 8%, the highest in Florida, though supporters say a portion of that tax is paid by tourists, and a property tax that pays for local transit would be eliminated entirely. Opponents, led by the No Tax for Tracks group, have criticized PSTA for using public money to promote the plan and question whether the elected officials who've endorsed it genuinely understand the long-term tax burdens.
So, Jen, who's more in touch with the mood of the voters in Pinellas County, the Republican Party there in Pinellas County, or the elected officials, the few who are Republican that have voted in favor of Greenlight?
I think it would be the Republicans as a whole, and I'm
shocked.
I know. breaking. Go tweet that. But with that being said, there are a lot of pro-transportation, pro-innovation Republicans that just think this is a bad idea. We have a misuse of funds. We have, they're saying there's a tax swap, but it's not a true tax swap. You're going to have folks that more often ride public transportation. They may not own houses. They may not benefit from lower property taxes. And so I just think it's a little bit disingenuous to say that that's a fair trade.
Do you think it's going to go down to defeat?
I would like to see it go down to defeat.
Barry, what's your take as a Democrat on the panel?
I think, as we talked about before, it's a great concept. They're having a little rough period of time. And I think the way it can be corrected, they have great leadership on the board with people like Carl Nurse and Chairman Ken Welch. I think if they step up and the board takes control of this and starts to have more transparency, they will eliminate the problems. Everybody I talk to that's against it is because they don't understand it. I think if the elected officials on the board come out and explain what they're doing, we'll be fine. So I think it will pass. It's having some rough bumps right now. And I do agree with Jen, though. The Republicans are pretty much united against it. The Republicans that are for it, there's a few elected officials on the county commission, but everybody else is generally against it. But the Democrats are for it, and I think most of the independents are for it. And the people that are going to need it are going to be for it, and it's going to benefit people like me who aren't going to take the bus, or people like Adam and the affluent reporters, because the cars are going to
oxymoron.
It's going to take cars off the roads and make the roads less congested. You don't have to ride a bus for this to benefit you. It's going to make the roads less congested.
All right. Before we go, what other news story should we be paying attention to? William, your other big story.
Well, this week, Waterfront Park opened up, and Waterworks Park opened up in Tampa, and I've got to say that I think this is another step forward in the revivification, if you will, of the Tampa Heights area, and another move forward in the sort of fits and starts process of generally reviving the city core, the urban core in Tampa.
Oops. All right, Barry, your other big story.
And I didn't bring it, but if today in the Tampa Bay Times, there's a voter guide by the Tampa Bay Times that has an analysis of all the elections going on in Tampa Bay. And the reason I bring this up is early voting has started in Pinellas and Hillsborough County, and the turnout with the vote by mail and that has been abysmal. We're probably heading for less than 20% turnout, and elections do matter. And it's August 26th, which is only 10 days away, is coming quickly. So if you're not And I realize these elections are low saliency. You don't really understand who your judges are, who the school board candidates. But the Tampa Bay Times, whether you're right or to the left, do a good job of saying the strengths and weaknesses of those candidates. And if you're for green light, you can find out who's for green light. If you're against green light, you can find out who's against it and vote. So vote on August 26th.
Wait, is the Tribune doing a voter guide as well?
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
We will do this.
Jen, your other big story.
I was going to say, as a Republican, I'd recommend the Tampa Tribune as opposed to the Times voter guide, but that's neither here nor there. The story, something that I think is important to pay attention to, is the lottery process that has come about with the medical marijuana bill that was passed this last year. And it deals with pediatric epilepsy, and I think that those children deserve better than for 60 farms that are currently existing to be able to just chosen at random so that 5 exist. I think that there should be some sort of minimal criteria, or at least whittle those down so that we know that those children that are receiving that medical marijuana get the very best.
All right. Adam, your other big story?
I think I'm going to go with the mass confusion State Senator Tom Lee is causing among Democrats and independents, paying for these robocalls, old Charlie Crist robocalls, to be going to people's voicemails, Democrats' voicemails, with Charlie Crist in his own words saying, "Vote for me, I'm the true pro-life Ronald Reagan conservative, so support me and the rest of the Republican ticket." And a lot of people are calling us very confused about what's going on.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for a great show. And thank you for watching Florida This Week. It's time to raise funds for this PBS station. Please call the number on your screen and make a donation, and let us know that you enjoy watching Florida This Week. Your donation sends a message that this show is valuable and worth keeping on the air. Also, please like us on Facebook. We just started the page and have only about 100 friends, so let's see if we can boost up that number. And remember, you can watch the show online on the WEDU.org website beginning Monday morning. We'll see you next Friday night at 8:30 and Sunday afternoon at 12:30. And from all of us here at WEDU, have a great weekend.
Florida This Week is a production of WEDU, who is solely responsible for its content.